Should we just, oh, I know what it's doing. It's defaulting to, I'm just going to switch it. All right. So now I look more like you.
Oh, that sounds better.
Does
Do you
it?
hear? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great. I can hear you great.
Okay, that's good.
All right. So nice to meet you. Thanks.
Yes, finally.
Yeah. Thanks for hopping on for a little bit. So I'm looking at, is this your studio or part of your condo or?
It's my bedroom.
Oh, nice, nice, nice. Is the effect?
So
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, so I actually work in the bedroom because I'm too scared to leave and have my own room.
Oh, right, right.
I like working when people are, like in the room. I don't like to be like in a separate place. I've been working from home for like 12 years, 12 years
Okay.
now.
Oh, nice. So at our place, we are lucky. We have a little room in the back, like separate
Mm,
from the house, connected to the garage. And
mhm.
when we first moved here, I was so excited. I was like, that's gonna be like the art studio, right? Like, so my wife was nice enough to let me set it all up. And then now it's ironic. Unlike you, I'm actually in the front of the house, which is kind of like when my kids are a little older now, but it was like their playroom where we had all their toys. And I could see when the delivery guy comes or the mail person comes, it's more it's way more social, because when I was back there, some people do really well in isolation, and I wasn't one of those people. Like I do better.
I agree.
Yeah, it's I mean, even with this, like that wasn't enough back there. But good to meet you, and then thanks for posting your question on Designers Guild. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, the group I know is very supportive, and people are. I think it's probably one of the best FD design groups where
Okay.
it's not all about just self promotion. It's really people helping each other out. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that was the best place to ask the question.
Yeah, there's a couple of good groups out there that I know about, but Designers Guild is definitely I think we struggle too, because a lot of the younger and newer designers will come, even some of the seasoned ones, they'll post a lot. And I think I get a lot of the direct messages where people are like, oh, that person's really neat, and they ask a lot of good stuff, but it seems to be more about them than anything else. Like I've
Mm.
never heard that about you, but so then I have some direct conversations with people about, oh, can you post a little, like, I love your questions, but can you post a little bit less? Because it's funny.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Some people have been just on for a long time, and they're like, oh man,
Mm.
I can't, when that person writes stuff, I just know they're really talking about themselves. And it's kind of, it's very interesting how people, because I don't read it like that. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a really good question. Like, I don't even know the answer to that.
Mm.
So it's just fascinating. But you've had your own group now for a while too, right? Like, how long have you had your
Yeah.
group?
Oh my, I don't know, maybe a few months or late
Oh,
last year.
okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty small group. Because there are a lot of Facebook groups here in the Philippines as well. And
It's
when I
pretty
started
popular.
that, yeah, it's very, very popular. To me, when I started that, it was really more about trying to um, help Filipino creatives
Sure.
kind of like do what I've done sort of successfully, which is find work outside the country and work from home.
That's
And
awesome, man, that you were able to
yeah,
do that. Yeah,
yeah.
it's bless you. There's a interesting, ooh, double bless you. There's a, yeah, my wife. There's an interesting dynamic where I think in the States, you'll kind of get this, I think when people were working offshore, or I think the word we use now that's very politically correct is we say distributed, because distributed seems to
Yeah.
say your designer or your engineer can be in anywhere in the world. They could be living on the
Yep.
end of a volcano or in the Antarctic. It doesn't really matter where your designer is or
Hmm.
your engineer is, or whoever's providing you services, whether it's a marketer. So I think it's a lot more widely accepted now. But I remember back in the day, like even my brother-in-law, who's from the Midwest, I love him to death, but like he'd always have something to say about, and it makes sense. He spent so much for his education, and then he ends up competing with people globally, right, on the internet. And he's retired already, but it was a little rough for him. Where
Right.
me being an immigrant, like I came to the States in the 70s. So I have more of a little bit more of a, he's got a worldview too. I shouldn't, say that he doesn't have that because he's traveled and he's actually been in Peace Corps.
Mm.
So, but it's still different, right? Like when you grow up somewhere and then you pay a lot for your education and all of a sudden you're competing, right? But it's the new reality. So I think you can either adjust to it or you can work against it, which I think is not very smart. So
Yeah, it's a world market. There's the internet, so you can't really control where people are getting stuff.
totally, totally. I remember back in the day when I was doing web design stuff, one of the tough things that my friend had a small agency, and then his thing was if he wasn't very explicit about his requirements, and it was web design and a lot of interactive work, people would just build whatever the shortest, fastest thing was to get to the goal of whatever he described. And he had to become he learned that a long time ago. It's like, if I'm not explicit, and so, which is great because I got to learn from him. So I work now with some people in India and they're amazing, super talented, but I have to be, because of the language barriers and stuff like that, I have to be really explicit. And sometimes I got this tip a little while ago. I think you're using it too. I'm using like Loom videos when I have to describe something that's pretty abstract,
Yes, you
right?
should. It's a good. Yes,
It's a good,
I haven't used it at that much, but I should be doing it. I've used it a few times when I was presenting. Like, um, you can't be physically there to present. So,
right.
and an email is not going to do it. Like, because you need to explain it. And so I explain it on video the
Yeah,
same way I would be doing it in person.
right. And you can do some hand waving and a screen share and
Yes.
almost like, or click through a prototype and, okay,
Yep.
this part's not there yet, but this is supposed to have this function. So yeah, you can give a lot of context, which is great. But yeah, let's jump back into what you were asking about. So what I found interesting about your background is really similar to mine. So I'm guessing I think I'm a little older than you, but you got
Oh,
into the
I'm about
HTML,
44.
you're
Yeah, I got
44.
into about 2000, maybe
Okay,
1999. I was doing you know dabbling in HTML here there,
nice.
but I wasn't really like an expert in it. I was more a visual guy. So
Oh, dude, no one was. In
yeah.
1999, if you were an expert at that, you were very special.
Yeah,
So
you were top 1% of making websites. Like,
yeah,
you're a guru.
yeah, pretty much. Um, so yeah, we had similar there. And then I think I stumbled into Flash because I think the way that I did it was, I don't know if some of the people who might watch this back, is I got into macro media because all these things were like a Dreamweaver and Flash and Fireworks. They were all macro media products before Adobe bought them.
Yes,
Some people might
yes.
not know that.
They
So
don't. I don't think they do.
right. So I was on the macro media bandwagon, and you were probably knew Quark and all those other things that were still around at that time, right? Or
I
just
knew about them. I never used them.
okay,
I just knew Photoshop 4. That was it. Photoshop
nice.
3 and Photoshop 4, and then it all expanded out from there.
Nice, nice. I was on the macro media bandwagon, and then that just was very lucky for me. Like they had good marketing, and I knew that all my teachers in design school, like, oh, you have to learn all the Adobe products. But I was watching this other company like make interactive stuff, so I was like, oh, this is cool too. So I got on that, and then did you get into the Flash thing too, or
We did a lot of Flash work, but I
okay,
wasn't as good as I was with like just Photoshop and
sure,
Dreamweaver. Um, I knew a little bit of Flash, working with the timelines and all of that. But I worked with a guy who was pretty good, doing the interactive stuff and the
sweet, sweet,
animation stuff. We used to
okay.
make like CDs, like
Oh
CDs you
yeah,
pop. Yeah,
yeah. What was Director?
yeah,
Were you guys using
yeah.
Director?
Instead of Director, we used Flash.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah,
I did that
like
too. Yeah.
yeah,
It's like
like
yeah, like an
when you pop it in,
executable.
it'll play automatically if you pop
Yeah.
it in your computer.
I forgot it could I did one how many of the I did one big project like that, but that was it. Did you do a couple?
We did like two or three of
Two or
those.
three of those.
Yeah, like one company was they were a manufacturer of like a lot of jeans or like denim.
Okay.
So they had like a huge catalog of like all the denim material that they had, and then at
Okay.
the end you'd have the CD, where you can plug
Yeah.
it in, and
That's, man, that was the thing back then. Kids today don't
that was
know. Like,
huge. That was huge back then.
it was, I forgot about that. So let's see, we got into the Flash thing, and then so I saw from your background a lot of similar, maybe just it's based on time, right? Like what people were doing or what was making money at the time. That's kind of what we learned, or it was the things we liked too, right? With, there was some alignment there, so we got lucky in that sense. But and then you did some team building as well at some agencies, right? Like you helped them hire their teams and build their teams out. Do you want to talk a little bit about how, what that experience
Actually,
was
when
like?
I started out, like web design and all those Flash things, and in 2001, that was that not a lot of agencies here in the country were involved in any of that.
Okay.
Like when I say agency, I'm talking about like traditional advertising, TV, print,
Oh, right.
outdoor, and all those. So none of them knew about digital, and I came
Right.
from um, a digital background, a web agency background,
Okay.
and they actually hired me. Like this company called Ogilvy. They're
Yeah.
a huge, yeah,
Yeah.
they're a huge global agency, and they hired me here in the Philippines to start the whole digital department locally.
That's
And
incredible.
yeah,
How did they find you? Was it your
I had
design
some
work?
connections. Like
Okay.
I had a friend who worked there,
Okay.
and then she was an account manager, and she said, everyone's going digital nowadays, and they're asking for websites, they're asking for, when we used to call them intranets,
Yeah. Yeah. I made some of those
so
too. Yeah.
yeah, they need to develop like these systems for their intranet and their and their marketing campaigns. They need websites and all those, and
Yeah.
they wanted to create portals, and
Sure.
those are the huge terms back then. So I built a team. I hired a designer and a programmer, and then I partnered with one of the marketing guys.
Sure.
Um, and then we pitched to like Nike, Nokia, and when Nokia was huge,
Right.
and
I
we
remember
got those
Nokia.
projects. We got those projects, and they're and last year or 2 years ago, they're it's okay, Georgie.
No, it's totally fine. My
She's
kids are
crawling on the
running around the back
yeah,
too.
she's
Yeah.
crawling on the floor.
No, no, it's
Um,
fine.
yeah, and that agency now they I think they won last year the top digital agency here in the Philippines. So
Nice.
we were the ones that
Kind of kicked it off, right? Yeah.
yeah, like in
That's great.
2003. So
So you've
so
definitely, yeah, it sounds like you've got that team building thing. And then
yeah,
did you, in those roles, did you project lead, or did you actually manage the resources as well? Like, today I need you guys working on this, or like what did that look like?
a little bit of both. Initially, it was pretty funny because since I was the only digital guy in the whole agency of about less than 100 people, I believe, at that time,
Right.
we I did like pricing, how to
Okay.
price web projects. I did um, finding resources like the people to work with, like programmers, whether they're internal or external.
Nice. Okay.
And then I had to present everything internally and also to clients. And I
Nice.
also had to design the
You were
the
like
actual.
you're the busiest guy there,
Yeah, I was a
or one. Yeah.
very busy person back then because everyone would ask, from the technical stuff. Although
Sure.
I'm not a programmer, but I understood what was needed to, like what kind of, oh, we need a system here, we need a developer to do something.
Right.
If this is the requirement, or we're not,
Totally.
we don't have enough people, we're gonna need to hire another, you know, development agency or something.
So
So
I think what's really fascinating, I don't know if this will help you, but based on the question that you asked, so one of my friends that I originally worked with back all the way back to 2003, I met this guy's, my friend Nick, and I met him at LegalZoom, and he was there. I was the first official resident designer, but Nick did a variety of things. But one of the things he did was design. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the founders there kind of recognized that Nick's strong suit actually wasn't design. Even though he went to school for it and he could do it, he was actually a lot better at project management and producing. So it was tricky because when they hired me, they're like, "Can you come in and help Nick out?" That was how they framed it, right? And I was like, "What does that mean?" So I go in, I see how they're doing everything, and I meet Nick, and it was very adversarial in the beginning. And then I took it upon myself where I said, I'm going to see what this guy's really good at. I'm going to see how we can work together. And then I'm going to make him like me. Like that was the challenge. Like, you know how you make it a game? And
Interesting.
it took like 3 months. And at the end of it, he really trusted me. We were making stuff together. We were looking good. We were working really hard. It was still the beginning of a startup. So probably really similar to you. We were working way too much and you were really young. That kind of, you know,
Yeah, I know that.
yeah, you know it,
Yeah.
right? And then he went on to actually not do design. He kind of left design, but he became more of he got into project management, and then after that he became like a producer. So he went to work for different agencies producing interactive, and he was really good at that. But it was
Mm.
that transition part from when I met him where he had to be okay with letting go of the design part. He was still kind of in love with that part. There was like a romantic nostalgic part to him because he could do the work, but it wasn't his real strong suit. And then, you know, after working with him for a while, like I got him to understand, like, I'm not a threat. I'm here to work with you and we're going to make good stuff. Um, and then I kind of, over a long time, I convinced him, I was like, dude, you're really good at this. Like, I think this is like, you can grow wings and do this really well. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm curious if maybe that's something you should look into because you've got the agency background, you've got the background where you built people. Is there a demand either there or a remote position that's kind of like an interactive producer role? Or does that interest you at all? Or do you want to always have your hands in the work?
That's a very, very interesting question because at this point, like I totally left that whole world in 2008 and really went through just doing my own thing, without having to like project manage or, it was really me as a designer finding my own voice. So
Okay,
I had left that, right? So I had left, like, producing and designing and managing this whole huge project
sure.
and just finding my own voice. And it was totally the opposite of digital work. It was for
That's,
apparel. It
yeah,
was I just
yeah,
decided I'm gonna be a t-shirt designer,
sure,
from a digital web guy, and that's how I actually um, found kind of like my own little success and
sure.
started working
Fantastic.
with Nike and Adidas and Jordan Brand and all these cool companies and like working in the music industry designing t-shirts for fans at
Okay,
the time, like, it was totally opposite. And but now, um I there was a company that in the US who also hired me to build a whole other team again of like 15 people back here in the country,
okay,
to do that, to do t-shirts. And but they didn't last. I mean, they're still around, but they grew too fast, so I had to hire them, and they asked me to let them go. It was a tough time.
right.
And but now I'm seeing myself also as someone who wants to do the design work, but also also very entrepreneurial, and I see a big picture, and I see market, and I see people, users, and I see business. I have a
Maybe,
couple I have a couple of businesses, so
sure. No,
so
yeah, I
yeah.
think your experience echoes a lot of other, I think there's a handful of people in Designers Guild that have that entrepreneurial streak and they want to own
Yes.
things. Um,
Yes.
so what came to mind to me when you said that I've been seeing this in the last few years, but they have these hybrid positions
Mm-hmm.
where there was a company I worked for. I'll be really frank. It was 2 years ago. CTO was my friend from a company that I worked for back in 2014, and the CTO went to another startup, um, and he brought a bunch of people with him. And then when they really needed a design component, he actually they actually had one in-house. Let me go back. They had one in-house. So they had this guy that was like a hybrid product designer. And I would say if you and me are maybe like, you know, maybe like a 7 to 9 in the design realm, his design was closer to 5. So he wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
great designer, but he was very competent. But his product management skill was like a 9. So
Right.
in a way, he was super valuable to them because they were getting 2 functions out of one guy. And then another company recruited him to go. They just outright, you know, cherry picked him. And then that's when my friend Stu called me, and he's like, hey, can you come in and fill this spot for us really quick? But the way that Stu framed it was, you know, you can do the design stuff, and if you're interested in the product stuff, maybe we'll see what happens. So I was there for like 6 months. I did a lot of good design. Like we did a bunch of landing pages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we were looking at Spotify. It was like a music company. So we were trying to like
Yeah.
evoke some of the same feeling without looking exactly the same. So we were doing some of that. And then somewhere in the end of it, he ended up hiring a product person. And then it was like a 1-2 punch because they got the internal product person. So I was helping a little bit on that end. And then they didn't need me for that. And then they got this content company that was writing a lot of content. They outside of me, they pitched design too. And they say, hey, we're doing all this other stuff. Why not fold it together? And it was
Oh,
unfortunate for me, but Stu was
yeah.
like, hey, I'm going to save a lot of money if I just let these guys do everything. That was kind of how he explained it. But then in
Oh,
my mind, I was like, what if I picked up the slack and I was the 50-50 guy, like the product and design? And I'm
right.
not sure if that's what you want, but that sounds like a possibility because you understand okay, what are the conversions look like? Are these landing pages working? Should we A/B
Yes.
test a new message, right? Like this message is really good. Is there a message that's a little bit better, right? And then
Yes.
possibly write a little copy to go with it. Like what's the variation of this message? And then we'll run it for a week. So
That's
again,
very interesting,
it
actually.
is, yeah. So
Yeah.
that wasn't the first time I saw that. The other time, there's another member in Designers Guild. His name's Brian, and I met him a few years back. But he left a really senior. I don't want to mispronounce his last name, so I won't say it. But if he sees this video, he might recognize himself. But he was working for, I think, SoundCloud or something. But he went to SoundCloud as like a lead product person. So I can't remember if he also had that hybrid kind of role where he had
Mm-hmm.
UX and product or something. So
Mm-hmm.
there might be something there. So if you're trying to kind of shore up all your product skills and you want to be more of a digital product person, if you kind of combine that with like, you know, the product helmet as well, like the traditional product role, which a lot of people sometimes don't like they don't want to look at spreadsheets. They don't want to hang out with, you know, or look at the numbers all the time or understand all that stuff. So there might be an opportunity there if you're pushing up on that. I think what's tough right now is I think companies have a hard time looking at us and distinguishing like who's better than who. Like it's because there's such a variety, and especially like us, we're a little bit older, you know, at the middle of the career part. So it's like, wow, these
Yeah.
guys both have done like super cool things, but they're really different. How do we know which is better for what we need? So I think they struggle with that sometimes. And then sometimes what might help you is you come in with like, oh, I write copy too. Have you seen my copy? My copy converts. You know, not only can I do these you know, these banners and stuff like that, but I can come up with all the content as well. Um, that's always helpful. But I know from what you were saying is you wanted to kind of niche yourself more into the UX UI part, right?
Yeah. I mean, or like somebody answered the question was when she meant you were talking about it as well, like product. And I wasn't really like, you know, in the know of all these terms, you know, because when I left, it was all just I was a web designer, you know.
Totally.
I was an interactive art director. That was it. And now it was, you know, there's UX, there's UI, and there's product. And when she explained product, and when you're trying to explain product, it's very interesting because I see myself sort of being in that realm as well of kind of knowing a bit of UX or kind of knowing a bit of UI,
Yeah,
um, but
absolutely.
really seeing a bigger, you know, like the user, um, you know,
Yeah,
the business side,
totally.
um, the money involved, and
So,
the experience. And then you're saying like kind of like writing a copy. I enjoy like writing a bit of copy, but I'm not a copywriter, you
right.
know. But so
That makes
So
sense.
product is very it's very interesting now that more people talk about it. And,
I think what's big now too is, so in that world, there's like you come in from either the research side where you're actually doing very little design. And
Mhm.
I know on the agency side, my friend, that guy, Nick, he refers to, when I say research and I talk to him about projects or new places to make money, he's like, Dave, you're talking about strategy. And I'm like, oh, that's right. Cause he's from the agency world here in the States. Like he thinks
Mhm.
of it as, oh, that's strategy. You research all these markets, you see where all these people are looking at media, you buy the media where their eyes are at, like whether that's TV or print. And I was like, oh, it's really fascinating. And I think what's different though now is it's that, like you said, it's changing. Instead of just getting out in front of them with a message, it's figuring out who they are and exactly what they need. Like, they might have a pain point in their life. Maybe their banking is awful, right? And that's where a digital product is perfect, where you can
Right.
improve a banking experience. So like, I remember it was such a big deal when people started depositing their checks with their cameras. Do you remember that? Like, and that was, to me, that's like one of the digital product kind of hallmarks of, like, that was a turning point when like you didn't have to go to the bank and you could use your phone and take a picture of a check. Um,
Yeah, that's fairly new here, but I guess it's more, advanced over there.
it got here a few years ago and it got really big really fast. I think a lot of people are adverse to change, especially with financial patterns and doing things because it's your money.
It's
But then,
true.
yeah, but the moment you see your friends do it, it caught on here really fast too. I'm not even up on all like the money exchanging things, like the Venmos of the world. Like just 3 years ago, a lot of the younger people, I was doing some work for City of LA, they were all passing money around with Venmo. And I was like,
Venmo and like Cash App, right? They don't have that
oh yeah. And
here.
I'm from back in the day. So I'm like,
Yeah.
PayPal? And they're like, what? What's PayPal? And I'm like, what's wrong with you? And it's kind of funny, right? Like the time difference. But I'm like, it's almost like the same thing. We're just like, PayPal just was using back in the day, the way I understood it is your email address equated to your bank account. So if you could give someone an email address, like pay this email address, that was like how they got me back in the day. I was like, that's so genius, right? Like you don't have to remember these account numbers. You just give someone your email address and say, pay that. And if you both are on the same platform, it'll map to, the right things and you can move money around. But I don't want to say kids because I don't want to sound like, that old guy. But a lot of those coworkers, like, yeah, they'd all buy lunch. And then right after lunch, they were like Venmoing each other back and forth. It's just what they did. I thought it was fascinating.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But they had a trust in it because they grew up with it and it's all
Yeah.
they knew. They didn't have oh, this is different. Like, this is my money. Can I trust it? It's like, Jerry did it for 3 weeks and he loves it. And then Susan does it. And then all of a sudden there's
Yeah.
15 people like passing money with this app. But yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting, like just listening to your story. And so there's the user research part, that really understanding the customer and their journey, depending on what industry you want to attack and where they're at in that industry. And then there's the other part, which is the design part, right? Like once you kind of have your personas and you kind of
Mm.
figured out this is who we're going after, this is where the money is. Um, how do we make something for them that's fantastic, right? That they can't stop using. So if I would dig in those two spots first, and because you have the design background, you'll probably lean much more into the making cool stuff part, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
like
if it's a product, like I'm seeing like product designers, this thing they keep saying, rapid prototyping. You need to prototype fast and all these things. And I'm like, me, if I am a designer and if I have some ideas that I wanna immediately put out,
right.
I'm also kind of looking at why don't I, just study things where I can just immediately create an app for this or a website for this, therefore going the
Totally.
no code route,
Yeah, no,
So
yeah, when you
yeah,
say,
so
yeah,
that was very interesting as well. And I follow a lot of people on Twitter and they're really harping on this no code stuff and all these apps are really doing amazing things. And I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. That's so fascinating. If I need an app tomorrow, I'll just create this here and I'll just add my logo, use their templates and just add my colors and all those things.
yeah, it's really cool. I think the pitfalls there could be, So what makes an app great is it's really customized to whatever that user's experience is. So you just have
Right.
to be careful that you're filling all the gaps of whatever they expect that transaction or that experience to be. But but man, it is really an exciting time. Like you've got you I'm sure you've seen in Designers Guild people talking about Figma and Webflow and all these things where,
Yes.
and I was really surprised. I think what I'm interested in personally is do you remember Flash? Do you remember doing symbols or reusable parts?
Yeah, my guy used to tell me about symbols a lot, and it's an instance, right, that you can reuse, and
Yes. It
once you
changes like,
change it, it changed
yeah,
the whole the instance everywhere.
right.
So somebody was showing me Figma the other day, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of like symbols and or like even in Illustrator or Photoshop. I think in Illustrator,
I think Illustrator
like
has them. I've never used them, but
when you
yeah.
symbols or when I use a brush, every time I use a brush that I create or something, if I change it, it changes all the brushes everywhere.
Right, right. It's kind of like a global change, like the parent,
Yeah, the global change.
yeah. The children inherit the parent's attribute or something is a good way to think of it. But in people are using like Figma in the instances sense because now there's all this talk about. I think what got really big in the last 2 years. I had an interview that I didn't get the job where I was really qualified, but the one thing I was missing was what the interviewer called component-based design. And then that's when I started really digging into like, what does she mean by that? And I was like, oh, she's talking about designing a widget or a piece of a website that has specific interactivity. And then somehow with your design tool and maybe some engineering and coding magic, you take that physical thing, whether it's a sketch file or a Figma artifact or something, and then something looks at it and makes code that the
Oh
developers
wow.
can actually leverage.
Yeah.
And then there's something else that we've got designers that also are from a company called, I'm going to botch the name, so forgive me, but it's like, it's Avocode. It looks like avocado, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like avocado, and it has something that's related to this too. Because I remember I wrote something, and someone in Designer Script was like, "Oh, that's what we do." You know, you design it, and then somehow it outputs code. But
Interesting.
yeah, but
Yeah.
actually, Webflow. So what's interesting with Webflow, I was talking about this on Twitter the other day, is I'm like, Webflow is just a WYSIWYG. Like it's a little more complex than Dreamweaver, and it does a lot more things. And it's very intricate, and you can get that granular level from Dreamweaver. But the difference is that I saw was Dreamweaver had the code view, and then
Yes.
the rendered view, right? And then
Yeah.
the newer stuff today, like there's all these plugins that kind of do the same thing, where you're writing raw code, and they
Mm-hmm.
have these like updaters in your like these plugins in your web browser that'll like instantly like refresh it like every half second, so you can see what you're doing. And I think what was the track I was on? So the Webflow stuff, yeah, I was just like, oh my god, this is like Dreamweaver, but they don't give you the code. There's no code view. But the way it works with Webflow is, if you have a higher level account, you export all the code, and then that's your chance to like take that base and then go, okay, I'm going to hire a developer friend, and we're going to do some very, higher level things with this code. Or, but what I think makes it really powerful is, I think it's Rand Segal. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, or Rand Siegel from Israel.
Ran. Yeah, Ran is the
Yeah,
guy that probably introduced a lot of us to Webflow.
yeah, he's really good, and he's got techniques where I think he can go in and he can like reverse engineer like an effect, like something really
Wow.
special someone's done, and he does it from inside of Webflow. From there, they have like I feel like this is turning a Webflow commercial. I hope not, because now we're not sponsored by Webflow, right? Let's be clear. But it's he can go in and then like basically clone a project, and then from there he takes it apart with like an engineering friend, and they're like, oh, that's how they did this animation, or that's how they made this move
Wow.
aside, or
Yeah.
so he's good at that, and I can really appreciate that. But they have to export the code to see it. You can't see it
Mm.
from inside, and maybe that's something they'll change later. But there's so much power there. Like when I hear him talk about, oh yeah, I used to hire an engineer to do all this other stuff, and it would take 3 more weeks because I would wait until they built something, and there's all this back and forth. Put some padding here. Like I deal with that now, and
Mm.
what's interesting to me is like, wait a minute, all that power is kind of given back to us inside of Webflow. And then if you can get the client to pay for the Webflow hosting, and if it can do, that's the part I don't know, how much functionality you can build inside of it if it's hosted in Webflow. Like one of my customers is
Yeah,
looking
that's the part I don't
for, right?
understand. Like, so you create something in Webflow and then you pay for them to host the website. Is
You
that
have
how?
you have options. Yeah, they can host it, which they would
Oh,
love, I'm
okay.
sure, or you can export the code and then
I see. And then you have to get your own hosting and then upload
yes,
all whatever the
and
in-
push it and then yeah,
files and
yeah. So
okay.
yeah, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much, but it's super exciting because a lot of the power is like given back to us. It feels like, with a tool
And
like
have
that's
you,
another.
speaking of WYSIWYG, have you ever encountered this software back in the day called Net Objects Fusion?
I remember it.
Yeah, that was like for me the ultimate because it gave you the power of like just dragging stuff on your artboard and then it created the HTML out of that.
Right.
Really, really bad HTML, so not a lot of people use it. But as a designer, it gave you complete control of just dragging text wherever you wanted to.
Oh man.
Wherever
Yeah.
you want the text, put it there. Wherever you want an image, put it there. But it was more like an HTML generator coming out of like a layout or design or composition
Sure.
that you were creating. But it was so bad in terms of the code
Yeah,
that
you wouldn't want to share it with your developer
the
buddies.
code was
Hey,
so bad because they would create so much tables and nested tables and
right.
it was so bloated. But to me as a designer, that was the ultimate power. um, I was being interviewed by Webflow the other like 2 weeks ago for they were testing some stuff.
Oh,
They
awesome. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it was more like they asked people to, have you used Webflow before, have you not used it before, we want to test some, some features. And I
Sure.
got interviewed by somebody, I think she was in Canada, and she was
Awesome.
showing me all these new things on Webflow. And as a user who's never used it before, and I was telling her about, I was expecting things that were, can I drag this, can I do that, because I was, as a designer, like used to Illustrator or Photoshop, I was still used to, just dragging things around. And,
Yeah,
if you put it there, that's where the text goes.
totally. It's
But
yeah.
yeah, and I told her about that software, and she was like super curious. Like I was hoping like maybe one day an app would, a software would help do that. Like coming from a designer's perspective, where wherever you want to put this on the grid or wherever on the page, it should land there.
Totally.
And that would be like a dream software for me.
I think they're getting close. I think we have to balance things because like now that we have devices where you could see on like a really big monitor and
Yeah,
then
that's the problem, right? So
yeah,
like
you take it
how does it become responsive then if you wanna put it
right.
here in the edge, or if you wanna put it there.
Totally.
So
I know. So Webflow and Wix, their solve for that is they give you those predefined sizes and then you tell everything where to be at that size, if that makes
oh,
sense.
okay, that's very interesting.
Super
So yeah,
interesting. Yeah. When I saw
yeah,
that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like
yeah.
you don't have to see the code, but you know what it
Mm.
looks like. And I think I'm hoping you can redefine what those because they give you like some probably general parameters. And then the one for phones is like it's really tiny, man. It's like 300 and I'm gonna
Wow.
probably get this wrong, but like 380 pixels or wide, which to me is really small. Um, but long story short is they're trying to give you that, and then when you do full screen, they have something in Webflow called container, which is only 940 pixels wide, which is like this one container that you put other stuff in, so it centers it and keeps it nice and neat. But
Oh,
anyways, I don't want to go down too far, but
wow.
it does some neat stuff. So
Yeah, it's
I
very. I haven't even tried it yet, but it's super interesting.
and I'll be totally honest, I used it like a year ago and I exported the code not understanding how all the responsiveness worked. And the exported code was really hard for me to work with. So I kind of wrote it
Oh,
off like a year ago or a little more than a year
right.
ago. And now I'm like, oh, maybe I'll sell this to people, but I'll just leave it in Webflow so then I can control all of those sizes, which is good for them too, right? Like, because then they're
Mhm.
hosting. Um, but that gets really neat. But let's get back to what we're to you and your journey.
Yeah,
Like, sorry, I could just go down this rabbit hole with tools, but
I know.
so yeah. So do you feel like if you do like kind of shore up some of those gaps with the product side, that What would you get into? Like, would you try to get into like, do you feel like because you had that, you took kind of that lapse to do all the entrepreneurial stuff, would you just want to come in as like a regular product designer or what people would call a regular UX designer? Or would you want a little bit of that seniority because you've been around for a while? Like how does that fit in how you see everything?
I was kind of looking at like I have a friend who runs a web development agency, and I was saying, man, can you just bring me in to be like an intern for UI and UX and all those things, so I can just start to learn the tools again.
Sure.
But as we were talking, like but the ideal would be like me coming in as a senior person, whether it's running a team,
Yeah. Yeah.
being able to speak to the business side, the CEO side, and
Sure.
the C-suite people, and then being able to obviously speak with the designers and sort of understand as well what the programming or development needs. So
Oh,
as a producer, but also coming in maybe like in a startup environment where everything is you can do a lot more things,
yeah. You're
spread
inventing
your
the
wings
process,
more.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Like,
spread your wings more, because in an agency, when they had to make me choose, when I started, I did everything. They had to make me choose. Do you want to be in this, you know producing side, developments, account side or business
sure.
side, or do you want to go creative side? And I chose creative at that point.
Right.
But I kind of also see that it kind of made me a little smaller in the sense of being able to really make an impact. But
Right.
I'm seeing when I left that whole, environment of corporate life, I realized that I thrived in an open environment of bringing in ideas and concepts and creating business ideas, and
Sure.
creating all these, just ideating and activating ideas. Because
So,
I
so, so
Yeah,
based on
so
what you just said, I'm with your friend. I see you at a startup that's already had some success, and they're having all these growing pains, and they have some designers, but the designers are asking questions of the senior people, and the senior people are like, I don't know. Like, hey, should we make it more responsive right now? Like, is that worth it to you? And the senior people are like, yeah, of course, everybody's got a phone, and they look at everything and they're like, oh, this looks like a 200-hour project with 4 guys, and they don't know how to kind of mix and match, like how can that, or create a vision for the product a year from now and then make a roadmap, like how do we get there, and work with the product person, but sometimes it's the founder, right? Like how do
mhm.
you work with the founder and then create that map, or the head of product, and that's what a good senior creative person can do. So I think if those
Yeah,
positions,
it's a good
yeah,
place to be in today.
I think that's a good place, because then you can come in financially, you could still take care of your family the way you're used to because you've already had some success, right? And
Mhm.
then you can have, some, I don't want to use the word dominion, that's such a bad word, but you can have some hierarchy where you're above the other people, but still doing all the right things, giving them a lot of respect and freedom, as long as they're on the same agenda as you are. Like they it's top down, right? Like they know what your vision is after you've come to terms with the owners or the founders or whoever the C-suite is. Once you guys are on the same page, and then you can create a plan for your team, like this is how we're going to get there. You might even, I've considered this too, where like, I don't know if it's possible too, but like heading up the engineering team, because I've been at places too where I've watched the engineering leads limit themselves to the kind of technology they were using rather than coming up with a really novel solution, saying, hey, we can use these 3 technologies that might be 3 years old, but they're really robust. And if you put them together like this, they'll do exactly what this new fancy thing does, but even better. Right. And it's almost like a creative way of like locking things together. It's like, and I don't want to downplay engineers because a lot of them can be super creative too, but a lot of times they're very binary. They like a lot of detail, and they like to know what they need to do when they need to do it, and they're very tactical in that way. So sometimes someone with a more open mindset, and I think that's why some of us become product leads too, is we look at stuff and we're like, hey, if we're really looking at the end game, let's not think about what we're going to use to get there. let's think about what it is. And then once we draw and map those lines, then we can start to plug and play different pieces. We might even use something that's from 3 years ago that's already stabilized and robust. Because I've also seen, there's one project I'm working on now where the project is 3 years old, but this design group used all these new technologies. And the way to update the site is so freaking convoluted. Like there's 6 steps to updating a website. And then from back in the day, I remember like using FTP, like making a change and going publish and going, oh my God, it changed. And to me, that was super exciting. And then now you have, for all the right reasons, you have version control and you have all these little components that do separate, they minimize, they minify the site and they do all these optimizations. I get it. I get why that's there. But we're inheriting the site now. And I'm just like, and I thought I was crazy. And then I showed it to my developer friend, Rocky, and he's working on the project with me. And he's like, I don't know why they did that. And I was like, was it shiny new object? Did they see all the cool new things and they just wanted to see how it worked? And it's like, yeah, I think they were teaching themselves new technology, but at the sake of the client, like having a website that's super hard to update. So they became super reliant on the company, to make edits. And anyways, it's good for us because they're having a falling out. So I'm trying to pick up that slack. So there's
I've thought of that, like leading a like the tech team or creative team.
Oh yeah. All right. Okay. All right.
You gotta go.
Yeah, I gotta go, man.
Yeah, no worries, man.
Oh
well,
yeah.
I think we're overboard. Like for how long were you?
Oh yeah. We kept going. I'm sorry. I was just had a lot of fun talking to you. So.
No, I had fun too. So.
Cool. So yeah,
let's do that again. Yeah. Do that again.
Do it again. So we'll catch up on another call, and then yeah, thanks for your time too, and I really appreciate that. And then we can play this.
Thanks for the advice. Yeah, thanks for the advice.
Yeah, and thanks for your stories are great too, because I always learn stuff too. I'd love to actually know more about the assembling the teams part, because I don't have a lot of experience in that area. So
maybe. I do have that because there's a lot of talent here. That's the thing. There's so much talent, but it's the dealing with other cultures,
right,
or other like Western cultures, that's a little harder for a lot of the talent. There are some nuances with the culture here as well, where a lot of I think like when people the old way, when you say distributed, right? A lot of people before they'd say, oh, we outsourced.
Right.
A lot of the experience is that the communication part is a lot of it is, it falls apart. So, but I think I understand like the local, like where they're coming from, but
totally.
it's just a little bit harder for them to communicate, I think, to people across the globe.
I get it. So they need people like us to translate, right? Like how we
exactly. We're basically translators.
Sure. Well, cool, man. Thank you for your time tonight. I gotta get to some other stuff for the family.
Yeah, man. And same.
All right.
Good talking to you. So talk again soon.
All right, AJ. Thanks for your time tonight.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care.